everyone, and welcome to another episode of Heaven Official's Blessing. Let me know how I sound and how we look. Changing up the setup a little bit, even though it looks no different to you. Next time it will. I have to finish putting up some new lighting, and then we will have an actual kind of studio space for live readings. That will be fun. For now, though, we will stick with the program we usually have. I'm here with Bob. You want to say hi, Bob? Say, nah, I'm asleep. I'm gonna go sleep. We are on chapter 40 of Heaven's Official's Blessing. Last time, Xie Lian had snuck into the ghost city to do his little mission. It's buzzing again. And after I've replaced this frickin' thing twice. Is now any better? Guess what I'm getting for Christmas? My mom's been asking what I want. I'm gonna tell her. Microphone. New one. This is crap. Hello, Crom for president. I'd vote for you, Crom. I would vote for Crom president. Hello, Robin, Don, and Callie Mae, goodest boy, Billy, well, really Helena, and Gimvi Zen. Thanks for joining us. Let me know if it sounds any better, and then we will continue. Okay, I don't know. The cord went dead on the original one, and that's why I changed the cord and it worked. Well, now this cord's having the same problem, so it's gotta be the mic. I don't know. Anyway, put that. Right there, I guess. Need a better spot for you. Alright. Hopefully it's still good. Let me know if it changed. Okay. We are on chapter 40. So, we are, last time, Huachuang, is the Chang really hard or no? Huachang or Huachung? Anyway. Still gotta put up that poster with all the names. Last time, Xie Lian and Huachang had found each other again in the ghost city, and were chatting, and Xie Lian left off with, so this is what you really look like, and that's where we ended. So we will continue there, with chapter 40, At the Paradise Manor, Questions of Xian Li 2. Maybe it was a figment of his imagination, but Hua Cheng's shoulders seemed to have stiffened for a flash of a second. Now I'm self-conscious about it. I'm going to keep stumbling on his name. Chung? Okay. The moment didn't last, and Hua Cheng casually responded, I did say that the next time we met, I would greet you with my real appearance. Xie Lian grinned. He patted his shoulder and said earnestly, not bad. Oh my god. Xie Lian's tone wasn't teasing, not consoling, and said very simply. Hua Cheng smiled back, and this time it was genuinely relaxed. They took a few more steps when Xie Lian suddenly remembered something important to confirm with Hua Cheng. He removed the silver chain from around his neck. By the way, Xie Lian said, did you leave this? Hua Cheng glanced at the ring and smiled. It's for you. What is it? Xie Lian asked. It's nothing important, Hua Cheng replied. Just keep it for fun. So, Xian Le? Like in French. Le. Xian Le. This book series is going to teach me so much. I'm actually in a Chinese class for language. I've got a year, and I gotta sit down and get to it. But I've had so many changes going on with the new equipment that I haven't done it. One of these days. Between, the video on YouTube and the gay books, I will learn Chinese. At least enough to get by. It's nothing important, Hua Cheng replied. Just keep it for fun. Although that's what he said, Xie Lian knew this object wasn't so insignificant. Then thank you, Sun Lang. I believe the necklace was left behind with him in a while. Okay, so I don't even know French. I did fail French twice in high school, so... Xian Le. Okay. Let's see. Back at the Gambler's Den, you said you were coming here to Paradise Manor. I'd thought it was something like a brothel or the Red Light District, but this looks more like an entertainment hall. Hua Cheng raised his brows. Guga, what are you saying? I never go to the red light district. Xie Lian was amazed. Really? You don't fuck? Of course, Hua Cheng replied. The two approached the black jaded divan and sat down next to each other. Hua Cheng continued. This is nothing but a place I renovate here and there, a residence of sorts. I come and chill here when I'm free. If I'm busy, I leave it be. So it's your home, Xie Lian commented. Residence, Hua Cheng corrected, not a home. Is there a difference? Xie Lian asked. Of course, Hua Cheng replied. A home has family. A place where someone lives alone is not a home. Hearing this, Xie Lian's heart tightened. By that definition, it had been over 800 years since he had had a home. Although Hua Cheng had no trace of loneliness on his face, Xie Lian thought they were perhaps alike. Hey, Cygnus, welcome. Hua Cheng continued. If it's home, then even a small place like Puqi... Did we decide it was Puqi? Puqui? I can't remember. I know Q's are C's, but are they always C's? Or is it like a I after E except after blah? Puqi Shrine would be better than my Paradise Manor by a millionfold. Xie Lian agreed and smiled. I didn't realize San Long is this sentimental, but to make comparisons using my shrine, you're really pulling my leg here. Hua Cheng laughed. What's there to be embarrassed about? Truth be told, Gege's shrine is small, but it's so much more comfortable than my Paradise Manor. It's more like a home. Is that so? Xie Lian said warmly. Then if you like it, in the future, come over whenever you want. The doors of Puqi Shrine will always be open for you. Hua Cheng's face lit up. Since Gege says so, then I'll gladly take your offer. Here's my water. Oh, it's empty. Damn it. Drink juice. Don't think me annoying in the future. He never could. There's no way, Xie Lian said. By the way, San Long, I want to ask you a favor, but I don't know if you'd have the time. What is it? Hua Cheng asked. This is my territory. You ask, I'll deliver. Hello, Liz. Welcome. After some thought, Xie Lian said, Before, when I was dealing with the case at Mount Yujun, I ran into this boy who might have originated from my kingdom. Hua Cheng narrowed his eyes but didn't say a word. Xie Lian continued, I didn't handle the matter very well and scared him off. After that, I requested a search without any success. Earlier, when I was running around the back alleys of Ghost City, I thought I bumped into him. San Long, you are the lord of this land. Is there any way you can help me find him? His face is wrapped in bandages, and he only just ran away from the steps of Paradise Manor. Hua Cheng smiled. All right, I've got it. There's no need to worry, Gege. Just wait. Xie Lian sighed a breath of relief. Truly, thank you again. This is nothing, Hua Cheng said, but you left Lang Changchu just like that. Xie Lian thought to himself, if Lang Changchu was here, straightforward and obtuse, it'd be hard to predict what other nonsense would come out of his mouth, and he'd start who knows what kind of trouble, so it was probably best to meet up later. Xie Lian replied casually, His Highness Taihua caused you trouble earlier at the gambler's den. Sorry about that. The slight condescending smirk appeared on Hua Cheng's face again. What are you saying? That didn't count as trouble in the slightest bit. Hey, Phil. For Gege's sake, I'll clear his account. He can do what he will, as long as he doesn't show his face in front of me. Xie Lian was now curious and asked, You don't care if there are heavenly officials frolicking about in your territory? Could Hua Cheng really be that fearless? Hua Cheng smiled. Of course you wouldn't know about this, but Gege, all three realms proclaim the Ghost City a hell of corruption, a demonic chaos. But in reality, everyone wants to come and carouse. So many of the heavenly officials pretend not to care and speak ill of the place. But behind everyone's back, they often come in disguise and conduct unspeakable business. I've seen it too much. If they don't stir up trouble, I don't care. And if they do, then even better, because then I can wipe them out. His Highness Taihua isn't trying to cause havoc on purpose. It's just seeing a round of bets of that sort go down. He had to stop it and couldn't hold back, Xie Lian explained. That's his lack of experience, Hua Cheng said impassively. To choose between letting yourself live longer for 10 years and cutting your enemy's life short by 10 years. To pick the latter, that's the basis of human hatred. He snorted and crossed his arms. That an idiot like Lang Changchu can ascend, the heavens are truly blind. Xie Lian rubbed his forehead, feeling a little guilty, thinking, you can't say it like that. After all, someone like me also ascended. Thrice. After some hesitation, Xie Lian spoke up again. Sun Long, it may be out of line for me to say this, but I still have to say it. The gambler's den is dangerous. Won't it blow up in your face one day? A place that allowed the bettings of sons and daughters and people's lives, granting wishes for others to drop dead, was dreadfully sinful. Never mind a little brawl. If one day the bets got out of hand, the heavens wouldn't be able to sit back and keep their eyes shut. Hua Cheng gave him a look. Your Highness, did you ever ask Lang Changchu why he had to rush into the mess? Xie Lian was slightly taken aback, not quite understanding the intent of the question. Hua Cheng continued, I bet he must have told you if he didn't do it, no one else would. He was amazingly on the mark, obviously having seen through Lang Changchu. You're right, Xie Lian said. That's exactly what he said. Then I'm the complete opposite, Hua Cheng said. If I don't control a place like this, then someone else would take control of it. I'd rather the person be me. Xie Lian knew when to step down and nodded. I understand. It seemed, although Hua Cheng was someone sentimental, he also cared for control and power more than Xie Lian realized. I think it's also just Hua Cheng's deep down an actual decent dude, and this place could be so much worse than it is, and he keeps it from being worse than it could be. Hua Cheng continued, Nonetheless, Gege, thank you for your concern. Just then, Xie Lian heard a voice that came from the door. A young man said, My lord, I've brought him. Xie Lian looked to the front entrance and saw the waning moon officer from before, bowing just beyond the beaded curtain. The one in his arms was none other than the ragged boy in bandages. Hua Cheng never turned his head. Bring him in. Thus the waning moon officer brought the boy inside and gently put him on the ground. Xie Lian couldn't help but peek at his wrist again to see whether there really was a cursed shackle. But the other curtsied and stood down swiftly after delivering the boy. Since there were more important matters at hand, Xie Lian bent down near the bandaged boy and instantly soothed him. Don't be scared. It was my fault last time. I won't do it again. The boy's eyes were widened in fear and confusion, but after running away so many times, he no longer had the energy to escape again. He peeked at Xie Lian, then peeked at the lap table on the black jade divan. Xie Lian followed his line of sight, and he saw he was eyeing a plate of luscious fruits on top of the lap table. The boy must have been hiding for too long and not eaten. Xie Lian turned to Hua Cheng, and before he said anything, Hua Cheng motioned. Do what you want. No need to ask me. It wasn't time to be polite, so Xie Lian uttered a thanks and reached for the plate of fruit before giving it to the boy. The boy grabbed the plate from Xie Lian and started stuffing the fruit into his mouth. It looked like he'd been starved for too many days and was desperately hungry. Even when Xie Lian was at his worst, starved like a wild dog, he'd never shoved food into himself like this. He didn't know what to say, and only chided gently. Slow down. After a pause, he attempted, What's your name? The boy mumbled as he ate, looking as if he was trying to say something but couldn't do so clearly. He might not have spoken in many years and has forgotten how, Hua Cheng suggested. Indeed, it did look like this boy didn't speak much, not even to Xiao Ying, who had been like this for a long time. Xie Lian sighed. We can do this slowly. By then, all the fruit on the plate had been devoured. Seeing his bandages were soaked with dried blood, covered in black and red spots alike, Xie Lian said gently, Your face is wounded. It looks serious. Let me have a look. Hearing those words, fear immediately engulfed the boy's eyes. However, after Xie Lian's tireless soothing and encouragement, he sat down once more obediently. Xie Lian came next to him and took out a bottle of medicinal powder from his sleeve, ready to remove the sullied bandages, when Hua Cheng intercepted. Let me do it. Xie Lian shook his head and moved his hands slowly, unraveling the haphazardly wrapped bandages. As he had suspected, although the face of the boy was a bloody mess, all the terrifying little human faces were gone. only large blotches of bright red scars. The last time they met at Mount Yujun, there were burns covering his face, but not as much blood. The boy must have used a knife to cut away those human faces from his own face, and left all those scars. Xie Lian's hands trembled softly as he rubbed the medicine in. Hua Cheng caught his wrist and said again, "Let me." Xie Lian shook his head again and gently pulled his hand free, then said in a low voice, "No, let me do this myself." 800 years ago, in the kingdom of Xianle, 800 years ago, in the kingdom of Xianle, many who contracted this disease without any other way chose the route of self-mutilation. It was hell on earth. Some would miss their target and cut where they shouldn't and die from blood loss. Some, although successful in removing the small human faces, never healed from those wounds. As Xie Lian wrapped new bandages around the boy's head, he realized his features were actually quite proper, his nose straight and refined, his eyes black and clear. He should have been a handsome young man, but now bore such a terrifying appearance. He was like many others before him. Even if he cut away the distorted human faces, his face would still forever be nightmarish, unable to recover. "Hey, Akatsuki." Xie Lian finally finished wrapping the new bandages and asked with a shaky voice, "Are you from Xianle?" The boy turned to look at him with big eyes. Xie Lian repeated his question several times, but he only shook his head. Xie Lian then asked, "Where are you from exactly?" The boy answered with difficulty, "Yong'an." The human face disease had only ever erupted within the kingdom of Xianle, yet this boy was from the kingdom of Yong'an. Xie Lian felt his sight go dark, and he blurted out, "Have you ever met the white-clothed calamity?" White-clothed calamity, the origin of plagues, the symbol of misfortune. He was the nightmare of the previous generation of gods, before Crimson Rain Sought Flower was born. If it wasn't for Junwu, who personally exterminated him, the nightmare would have probably continued even today. This supreme ghost always wore snow-white funeral garb, his expansive sleeves fluttering, and a cry-smiling mask on his face. This mask was called this because half of it was smiling and the other half was crying, half joyous, half sad. If he should be seen anywhere, it would mean that place would soon be doomed to ruin, and the world would fall into chaos. In the last battle, Xie Lian was standing on the top of the highest tower of the palace of Xianle, his face covered in grime and tears, lost and bemused as he gazed below to his kingdom. Within his blurry vision there stood a white silhouette among the fields of corpses just outside the fortress walls, his giant white sleeves fluttering, obvious and distinct. Xie Lian dropped his head down to look at him, and that white apparition also raised his head to look at Xie Lian and waved at him directly. That cry-smiling mask was the nightmare Xie Lian couldn't chase away, even after hundreds of years. Chapter 41, At the Paradise Manor, Questions of Xianle. The boy didn't seem to know who the white no-face was, and only watched Xie Lian with a blank expression. Then the boy suddenly shouted, "Ah!" Turns out Xie Lian had grabbed onto his shoulders and unconsciously gripped them too tight. It wasn't until he shouted that Xie Lian came to and hurriedly released his hands. "I'm sorry." Hua Cheng spoke in a low voice. "You're tired. Go rest." As soon as he said those words, a small door on the side walls of the hall opened, and two dainty girls entered to take away the boy. He looked back at Xie Lian as he was led away. Xie Lian told him, "Don't worry. I'll go find you again in a bit." After the boy was taken away, Hua Cheng turned to Xie Lian. "Sit down and relax, and don't see him for now. If you have any questions for him, I have my ways of prying open lips." Prying open lips sounded rather horrifying, and Xie Lian hurriedly replied, "No, that's all right. If he couldn't say anything, then let it go. We'll take this slow." Hua Cheng sat down next to Xie Lian. "What are your plans for the boy?" Xie Lian, looking exhausted, gave the question some thought. "I think I'll keep him by my side and bring him along with me first." "He's a ghost, not a human," Hua Cheng said. "Why don't you leave him here in Ghost City? I've no trouble feeding another mouth." Xie Lian watched him and said earnestly, San Long, thank you, truly, but... He sighed. I want to bring him along, and not just for the purpose of raising him. The ghost city certainly belonged to Hua Cheng. If he was willing to protect the boy, then no one could harm him and he wouldn't go hungry. But other than that, the most important thing for the boy was guidance, to help him organize his mind and speech so he could look and behave normally. The ghost city was a bustling place, chaotic and wild, not ideal for counseling. Other than himself, Xie Lian couldn't think of anyone else who would have the patience to undertake the task. Hey, Lobsol, welcome. Xie Lian replied slowly, I'm already immensely grateful you found him for me. I can't trouble you further with the aftermath. Hua Cheng appeared to disagree, but didn't push any more. He said plainly, It's really no trouble. When you're here, if you need anything, just let me know, and you're free to go wherever you want. Suddenly, Xie Lian noticed the scimitar on Hua Cheng's waist had changed. Xie Lian looked down and his curiosity was instantly piqued. Turned out, on the hilt of the scimitar, there was a silver eye crafted upon it. The pattern of the eye was formed by a few rough silver strokes. Although simple, it looked mythical, as if alive. He didn't see it at first because the eye was closed into a thin line, but just then the eye fluttered open and revealed a crimson, gem-like eyeball. Within the socket, it twirled once. Hua Cheng noticed it too and spoke up solemnly. Gega, I need to leave for a bit. I'll be right back. An alarm? Xie Lian asked. Could it be that Lord Windmaster and Chang Chu showed their true selves in the ghost city? Xie Lian rose too. I'll come with you. Hua Cheng gently pushed him back down. Don't worry, it's not His Highness Tai Hua. Gega, just sit here. There's no need for you to go. Since Hua Cheng made it this clear, Xie Lian couldn't insist on going along. Hua Cheng turned and left the main hall, waving as he walked away. The beaded curtain parted automatically as he approached, and after he exited, the beaded curtain let itself down, clacking, its sound crisp and clear. Xie Lian relaxed a bit on the black jade divan and thought about the bandaged boy. Recalling he was scared of strangers and emotionally unstable, Xie Lian couldn't sit still and rose again, determined to go see the boy. He passed through the small doors the girls had left from and came to a small garden. The vermilion corridor cutting across the garden was empty of life. Xie Lian was still wondering which way to go when suddenly a black shadow flashed by. It was the silhouette of the waning moon officer. Xie Lian recalled the cursed shackle on the officer's wrist. It had been on his mind. He was about to call out to him when the silhouette disappeared. The way he behaved was like he was afraid to be discovered, so Xie Lian closed his mouth and soundlessly followed him. Turning to the corner of a building where the officer disappeared, Xie Lian clung to the wall and stealthily looked around. The youth moved swiftly and was constantly on the lookout around him, extremely cautious and indeed afraid to be found. The waning moon officer was one of San Long's subordinates, working under him in his territory. So why all the sneaking around? The more Xie Lian thought, the more he was suspicious that the officer possessed malintent, so he hid himself and followed. The masked officer made a number of turns through the hallways. Xie Lian followed closely, within 50 steps behind, holding his breath and watching. Finally, they rounded a corner and came to a long hallway, and at the end of the hallway was a set of strange, large, beautifully decorated doors. Still following behind, Xie Lian thought, if he turns around now, there won't be anywhere to hide. But just as the thought crossed his mind, the waning moon officer stopped and turned his head. The moment he stopped, Xie Lian was alert and extended his arm in a hurry. Ruoi flew out and wrapped itself around the wooden beam overhead, pulling Xie Lian to the ceiling, where he clung to the beam. The officer didn't see anyone behind him, and didn't think to look up, so he turned around again and continued on his path. Xie Lian, on the other hand, didn't dare let him down. Ugh. Why am I tripping on my words so much today? Xie Lian, on the other hand, didn't dare to let himself down so soon. He stayed put on the ceiling, silently inching forward. He thought he rather resembled a gecko. Good thing the other party didn't go far and stopped before the set of doors. Xie Lian stopped too to observe. In front of the door there was a statue of a woman, wily and beautiful. But of course, from Xie Lian's angle, he only saw a circular head in a shadow, a round jaded plate in her hands. The masked youth didn't move from where he stood and didn't move to open the door. Instead, he turned to the woman's statue and raised a hand, tossing something into the jaded plate. The clacking sound was crisp. Dice, Xie Lian thought to himself. It was a sound he'd heard too many times earlier, and not one he'd forget for a long time. Can you imagine? So they were so flirty with the dice roll, right? You know? And so that memory is associated with the He's gonna have a Pavlovian reaction to dice. He's gonna be playing like Monopoly with the family or something, and everybody be like, why are you so red all of a sudden? What's going on? Do not ask. I have a thing about dice. I'm sorry, that just occurred to me. Aw, well thank you, Liz. I'm glad you enjoy it. Let's see here. It was the sound of dice hitting the bottom of a gambling cup, just as he'd suspected. When the masked youth removed his hand and Xie Lian looked, it was indeed 2 dice in a jaded plate, both revealing 6 red dots. After tossing the dice, the masked youth removed them from the plate and put them away before opening the door. The door wasn't even locked. When he entered through the doors and closed them behind him, Xie Lian didn't hear any sounds of locks activating either. After waiting a moment, Xie Lian gently lowered himself to the ground, quietly as a piece of paper, and crossed his arms to examine the set of doors. Technically, the building didn't seem that big, and whatever the Waning Moon officer was doing inside should make noise. Yet after he closed the doors behind them, there were no more sounds coming from within. Xie Lian contemplated and raised a hand to push. As expected, after pushing open the door, there was nothing and no one inside. Only a small table and 2 chairs. It appeared to be a normal, luxurious bedchamber. By the looks of the setup, there was no possibility of there being a hidden path. Xie Lian closed the door and looked to the woman's statue, moved his gaze to the jaded plate in her hands. No doubt the mechanism lay in that plate and the dice. So the building is still locked, Xie Lian thought. Not with physical locks, but with magical locks. To open the lock, there needs to be a key or a password. The dice must roll 2 6s in order to see the real destination behind the doors. But for Xie Lian to throw out 2 6s right then and there, that was something that would never happen in the world. He could only watch the door and sigh. He paced in front of the doors, his eyes glued on them, but still turned around to leave in the end. After walking for a bit, he stopped abruptly. From the other end of the path came a tall, red-clad figure, with a slender and long silver scimitar hung from the waist. It was Hua Chuang. He walked over with his arms crossed. Gaga, I've been looking for you. He looked exactly as he did when he left, only the scimitar on his waist was out of its scabbard. It, along with the scabbard, clattered against him, clanking as he walked, painting a picture of arrogance. The silver eye on the hilt of Yiming was closed. Xie Lian composed himself and said, I was going to see that child, but your house is too big and I got lost. Xie Lian was originally going to tell Hua Cheng what happened, but when the words came to his lips, they turned around, and he swallowed them. Xie Lian hadn't forgotten the goal of this visit to the ghost city, dang it. Hello. I'm doing a stream. I forgot to text you. I know, I need to set an alarm on my phone. Okay. Yes. Okay, bye. It's funny, she's fussing at me to remember to text her. Okay, who knows? Perhaps the missing official was imprisoned in this room. If he decided to not ring the alarm and see if he could go through the doors first. If Hua Cheng had nothing to do with it, then Xie Lian would report the suspicious subordinate at once. But if Hua Cheng was involved... Xie Lian was deep in thought, but Hua Cheng took no notice and spoke as he led Xie Lian back to the main hall. If you wanted to see that boy, I can send someone to bring him to you, and you only need wait at Paradise Hall. It was probably because he was hiding something, but when Xie Lian heard Hua Cheng's tone of voice, he couldn't help but become more docile. You finished your business that fast? Hua Cheng snorted, his lips curling in disdain. It's finished. It was just another band of useless trash embarrassing themselves. That's all. Hey, Jeff. Hearing him say useless trash, tone familiar, Xie Lian guessed. Was it the green ghost Qirong? Hua Cheng smiled. That's right. Didn't I tell you many have their eyes on this place of mine? Xie Rong has wanted Ghost City for himself for years now, but the most he could do was wait and burn with envy. Every so often he'll send some equally useless underlings to stir up trouble. Nothing worth mentioning. Don't mind it. Actually, I have a place I want to show Gaga, but I don't know if Gaga would grant me the pleasure. Of course, Xie Lian replied happily. Traversing through the long halls, Hua Cheng led Xie Lian to another large hall. The doors of the hall seemed to be made of steel, with violent beasts carved upon them, horrible and terrifying. The moment Hua Cheng approached, the beasts parted ways and opened the doors. A blast of killing intent blew at Xie Lian even before he stepped foot in the hall, and he tensed, veins popping on his hands, prepared to face anything. However, after seeing clearly what was inside the hall, he blinked. His defenses melted away in an instant, and his legs moved on their own, bringing him into the hall. Within the hall, all manner of weapons were hung on all four walls. There were scimitars, swords, spears, shields, whips, axes. It was an armory. Anyone, as long as they were a man... Okay, really? I would be excited to see all these weapons. Anyone would. Anyone, as long as they were breathing. When situated in an armory such as this, surrounded by all kinds of weaponry, would feel as if they were in heaven, and their blood would boil with excitement. Xie Lian was no exception. His eyes were wide and his face lit. The last time he'd shown such excitement was in Jun Wu's armory. Although his face remained schooled, his heart was battering in his chest, and his speech stammered. May I touch? Hua Cheng smiled. As you like. Xie Lian's hands instantly flew out to feel the many treasures hung on the walls, caressing them as if drunken. All of these are masterpieces. This sword is splendid. It must be a sight to behold on the battlefield. This one, too. Wait, and that saber. Hua Cheng was leaning on the wall near the door, watching Xie Lian's face go red with thrill and obsession. Gaga, what do you think? Xie Lian was examining each piece so intently, he was reluctant to turn his head around. What do I think what? Do you like it? Hua Cheng asked. I do, Xie Lian replied. Do you really like it? Hua Cheng asked again. I really do, Xie Lian exclaimed. Hua Cheng seemed to have snickered, but Xie Lian didn't notice. His heart was busy racing as he unsheathed a shimmering verdant blade of at least 4 feet, marveling as he did so. Are any of them good enough for you? Hua Cheng spoke up again. Xie Lian's entire face was bright and glowing, unable to stop his marveling. Good! Good! They're all good! Originally, I was thinking Gaga didn't have any useful weapons on hand, so if there was anything here good enough, you could pick something for yourself, Hua Cheng said. But since Gaga likes them all, I'll give them all to you. No, there's no need, Xie Lian said hurriedly. I have no use for weapons anyway. Hello, Boggy, welcome. Really, Hua Cheng said, but it's obvious Gaga really likes swords. Liking doesn't mean I have to own it, Xie Lian said. I haven't used one in years. Just looking makes me happy. Besides, I'd have nowhere to put them if you gave them all to me. That's easy to solve, Hua Cheng replied. I'll give the entire armory to you. Xie Lian took that as a joke and grinned. There's no way I can take a room this big. No need to take it away, Hua Cheng said. I'll give you the property too. Just come visit when you're free. No, it's okay, Xie Lian said. An armory requires constant maintenance. I'd hate to see the weapons suffer. Xie Lian placed the sword carefully back onto its holder and said nostalgically, Once upon a time, I owned an armory like this too. But it was burnt down. All these weapons are precious devices to be desired. You have to cherish them, Sanlang. That's easy too, Hua Cheng said. If I'm free, I can help Gaga maintain the armory. Xie Lian laughed. Well, I certainly don't have the guts to ask my lord the Ghost King to do chores for me. God, this man is so obvious. I feel like that is a trend in this author's work, in many works in this genre, but especially in this author's works where one of the people, at least, is so obvious in how they feel for the other person, and I feel like Hua Chung takes that to 11. He just, you want the whole thing? Here, take the room. I will write you the deed. You can have all of it. This is our second meeting. I will give you a house with swords. Suddenly, Xie Lian remembered Jun Wu's warning right before he left for the mission. The wicked scimitar Yiming is a cursed blade of misfortune. A weapon of such evil can only be forged by an exceedingly cruel sacrifice and a bloody will. Do not touch it, and do not let it touch you, lest the consequences be unimaginable. Xie Lian contemplated, but still decided to ask in the end. But Sun Long, all of these weapons don't even come close to your scimitar Yiming, right? Hua Chung cocked his left eyebrow. Oh? Has Gaga heard of my scimitar too? Only some hearsay, Xie Lian replied. Hua Chung snickered. I bet it's not nice hearsay. Did someone tell you my scimitar was forged by an evil, bloody ritual, that I sacrificed live humans? Sharp as always, Xie Lian responded. Not too horrible. Everyone always has their own bad rumors, but not everyone would believe them. I don't know if I might have the honor of seeing the legendary scimitar Yiming. You've actually already seen it, Gaga, Hua Chung said. He took a few steps closer to Xie Lian and said in a low voice, Look, Gaga, this is Yiming. The eye upon the scimitar, which hung at his waist, twirled in Xie Lian's direction. It might be Xie Lian's imagination, but he thought the carved silver eyelid started squinting into a crescent shape. His sword's really happy to see him. I love it. His sword is so cute. It has a personality, and it really likes Xie Lian, because of course it does. The first thing it did was smile. Alright, we're going to read one more chapter. Chapter 42. Borrowing the Underpath. Night Crawl in Paradise Manor. Xie Lian bent down slightly and greeted, Hello there. Hearing the greeting, the eye squinted harder, turning itself into a full crescent shape as if smiling. The large eye spun left and right extremely lively, as if it wasn't just a pattern carved onto a scimitar hilt, but a real live eye born of a human. Hua Chung's lips lifted upward. Gaga, it likes you. Xie Lian raised his head. Really? Hua Chung raised his brow. Really? If it didn't, it'd be too lazy to even blink open. In fact, there are very few that Yiming actually likes. Hearing this, Xie Lian felt at peace and said warmly to Yiming, Well, thank you. He then turned to Hua Chung. I rather like it too. At his words, the eye blinked madly, and the scimitar started shaking while still hung around Hua Chung's waist. He reprimanded it. No. What no? Xie Lian asked. No, Hua Chung reiterated. Yiming shook harder, looking desperate to be freed from the scabbard. Xie Lian asked curiously, Are you telling it no? Yeah, Hua Chung explained in a serious tone. It wants you to pet it, but I'm telling it no. Xie Lian grinned. Well, what's wrong with that? He stretched out a hand. Yiming widened its eye, looking at him expectantly. Xie Lian was going to pet the eyeball, but thought that would be poking the eye and hurting it, so he lowered his hand and stroked lightly along the curve of the hilt. The eye had squinted itself into a full crescent line and quivered even harder, as though it was pleased and enjoyed the touch. Xie Lian thought it was incredibly intriguing the more he stroked the scimitar. Xie Lian himself was the type animals liked. When he pet those furry dogs and cats, they'd get comfortable and throw themselves into his embrace. Who knew that even he'd be petting a cold silver scimitar, the legendary scimitar no less, like he would a puppy? How was it a cursed blade of misfortune? Xie Lian didn't believe it before, but after seeing it with his own eyes, he threw away the awful hearsay into the not-believable pile of trash. An evil, bloody ritual would not forge a spirit this clever and cute. Can't get over them. Oh, I can't get over them. I love it. The two spent a copious amount of time discussing and critiquing various swords and blades in detail, and Xie Lian exited the armory in high spirits after, grabbing hold of Hua Chung's hands to return to Paradise Hall. Oh my god, they walked back holding hands. Oh my god. The boy had also been brought in after being washed up and dressed in clean bandages. Although his face was still wholly covered, he looked new and refreshed. Looking at him anew, the boy was slender and delicate, and should have been a seedling with infinite possibilities. But alas, the him now was one with his shoulders slumped and waist bent, a shriveled form who couldn't meet anyone's eyes. Xie Lian couldn't help but feel heartbroken for him. He pulled the boy to sit. The last few words Xiao Ying said had the intent of asking me to take care of you, and I technically agreed to it. But nevertheless, I still have to ask for your opinion on it. Would you be interested in following me in cultivation from now on? The boy watched him blankly, as if afraid to believe the words he was hearing, that someone was actually willing to take him in and cultivate. He looked hesitant and hopeful. Xie Lian continued, I can't say the conditions at my place are good, but I can still promise you, you won't need to hide any longer. You won't need to steal food or be beaten. When he spoke, Xie Lian didn't notice that next to him, Hua Cheng's eyes were narrowed, watching the boy with a cold, judging look. Xie Lian continued warmly, If you can't remember your own name, then why don't we come up with a new one? The boy thought about it and said, Ying. Xie Lian supposed the name was to commemorate Xiao Ying and nodded. Good, that's a good name. You're of the kingdom of Yong'ang, and Yong'ang national surname. And Yong'ang's national surname is Lang, so why don't you use that as your new name and call yourself Lang Ying? I didn't know places could have national surnames. Like the whole country just has that's the surname? Interesting. The boy finally nodded. Xie Lian took that as the boy's acceptance in following after him. The banquet began. It was a small feast Hua Cheng had prepared for Xie Lian, but by its setup it was the size that could very well host over 10 people, and numerous women had in their hands jaded plates, and upon the plates were various kinds of delightful refreshments, delicate dishes, fresh fruits, and goodies. Their offerings were endless, and their steps were dainty and light as they walked along the sides of the main hall in a line, each presenting their jaded plate as they approached the black jaded divan. Lang Ying watched but didn't dare to reach out, and it wasn't until Xie Lian pushed a few of the plates toward him before he slowly grabbed a few items to eat. Watching him, another scene flashed in Xie Lian's mind. It was of another boy whose face was wrapped in bandages, dirty and unkempt, kneeling on the floor with a plate of offerings. His head bowed low as he stuffed his face in secret. Just then, a sashaying lady in purple silk approached, offering a carafe of wine. Hua Cheng reached out and poured Xie Lian a glass. Won't you have one? Xie Lian had a bunch of things on his mind, and he wasn't paying attention, so he carelessly accepted the glass and drank. It wasn't until the liquid entered his mouth he realized it was wine and moved his gaze back. But this turn made him see what was behind Hua Cheng's back. The lady who offered the wine winked at him. Xie Lian spat on the spot. Good thing he'd already swallowed the sip of wine and nothing came splattering out of his mouth. He only choked, coughing non-stop. Lan Ying took fright and almost dropped the cake in his hand. Xie Lian soothed as he coughed. It's nothing. Hua Cheng gently patted his back. What's wrong? Is the wine not to your liking? Xie Lian hurriedly explained himself. Oh no, it's very good. I just suddenly remembered my cultivation method forbids alcohol. Oh, Hua Cheng said. Then it is my fault for not being considerate and making Gege break his vow. It's not your fault, Xie Lian said. I'd just forgotten. Xie Lian rubbed his forehead, turned around, and stealthily glimpsed towards the center of the main hall. The lady who'd offered wine had her back to him as she sashayed away to the doors, her figure sensual and seductive. Hua Cheng was only minding his own business, or was focused on Xie Lian completely, and had no eye for the beautiful women, and therefore naturally did not care to see their faces. But the face Xie Lian saw was clear and recognizable. The lady who'd offer wine was none other than the Windmaster, Qing Xuan. I keep messing up that name. Oh, man. Okay, now I see what happened. So, the Windmaster snuck in as a lady working the party, and that he spat because he saw her and freaked out. The Lord Windmaster had snuck into Paradise Manor disguised as a woman. The wink gave Xie Lian quite the shock, and he thought, you'd best give me more booze to swallow this down. Unaware, Hua Cheng said conversationally, I'd always thought cultivation was simply for living a carefree, hedonistic life. If you must forbid this and that, what's the point? What do you think? Xie Lian steadied himself swiftly and casually conversed back. That depends on the path you choose. Some sects don't mind earthly pleasures, but my chosen path of cultivation has always forbidden drinking and promiscuity. Alcohol can be overlooked once in a while, but abstinence is absolute. When he said the word abstinence, Hua Cheng cocked his right brow and displayed an unreadable expression of either displeasure or annoyance. Right now, he is that meme of, now I will sit here consumed with lust for the rest of the evening. Xie Lian continued, actually, it also forbids hatred. A gambling hall involves extreme joy and anguish and can easily produce hatred, so it should be avoided. But if one is sure to maintain peace at heart, unmoved by wins and losses, then avoidance isn't technically necessary. Hearing this, Hua Cheng laughed out loud. So Gege was able to have the pleasure of entering the gambler's den. Going around in circles, Xie Lian finally brought the subject of the conversation back to gambling and said, speaking of which, San Long, your gambling techniques are amazing to behold. Hua Cheng chuckled. It's just good luck, nothing else. Hearing this, Xie Lian compared himself and felt rather woeful. He cleared his throat softly. Well, look at me. He waved his hand and didn't finish. I'm really curious, is there really a technique to rolling dice? If there wasn't, then Hua Cheng couldn't just call the numbers as he wanted back at the gambler's den, and wanting Moon Officer couldn't have so easily tossed out 2 6s. Hua Cheng smiled. Naturally, there is a secret technique, but it's not something that's learned in a day. Xie Lian had expected that answer. He wasn't hopeful with the question anyway, and was trying to come up with other ideas when Hua Cheng continued. However, I can tell you of a faster way. I promise Gege would always be able to succeed as he wills and win every round. What way? Xie Lian asked. Hua Cheng raised his right hand. It was the very same right hand with a red string tied on the 3rd finger. The red string was tied into a small bow on the back of the hand, bright and vivid. He extended the hand and beckoned Xie Lian. Now, I know that the red string of fate is a folklore some story in at least Japan. I don't know about more Eastern. I assume that this is referencing the red string of fate, which is supposed to, like, connect you to your destined lover or what have you. It's a trope in love stories where it connects two people who are destined. That's what I'm kind of getting the vibe for with that he has this red string. I don't remember plot-wise why he has a red string, but I think that's, what it's referencing. I learned something new the other day reading a different Chinese story, Here You Are. Great, great comic. Read that. Where apparently wearing rings on your fingers in China, each finger has a different meaning. Like, one means engaged, one means dating, one means married, blah, blah, blah. I wonder what the 3rd finger means. I wonder if that has a special meaning and in relation to the red string. Hello, Anubis. I'm so glad you like my work. Thank you. Alright, let's get back to what we were doing. I just had that thought just now. I wonder if the 3rd finger is what it means. Give me your hand. Xie Lian didn't know what it was for, but since Hua Cheng asked for his hand, he gave it to him. Oh my god, you're already so far gone. Hua Cheng squeezed his hand and held it for a bit, smiling before he turned his hand over and tossed 2 dice into his palm. Try it now. He chanted mentally for 6s and rolled the dice. Rattling to a stop, the die did indeed reveal 2 red 6s. What trick is this? Xie Lian asked curiously. No trick, Hua Cheng replied. I've only just lent you some luck. So luck is like spiritual power and can be borrowed, Xie Lian said in wonder. Hua Cheng laughed. Of course. Next time, if Gege is going to make bets with anyone, come see me. I'll lend you as much luck as you want. I promise your opponent will suffer a loss so great he won't be able to return in 100 years. I need to advertise myself on Twitter. I do have it set up to announce on Twitter, and it has all the tags. Let's see, what tags did I use today? I used the tgcf tag. Is that the big one? Because I know that's where most of the fans of this series are active, is probably Twitter. But it's definitely been a shocking experience since we've started these readings. there's been a huge influx of people who are fans of, like, you know, Chinese web novels coming to the channel, when before 99% of my audience was definitely silent. It's just so funny to me that my fan base is divided between horror, Silent Hill horror game, gay Chinese web novel. I love it. It's great. Okay. Hua Cheng laughed. Of course, next time if Gege is going to make bets with anyone, come see me. I'll lend you as much luck as you want. I promise your opponent will suffer a loss so great, he won't be able to return in 100 years. The two played around for many rounds, and Xie Lian confirmed for himself it was indeed so, before stopping to say he was tired. Hua Cheng got up immediately, had someone take Lang Ying to settle, before personally escorting Xie Lian to the guest chamber. Watching as his silhouette disappeared down the hall, Xie Lian closed the door, sat by the table, and used a hand to cover his forehead, supporting his lowered head. The more thoughtful Hua Cheng was, the more guilty Xie Lian felt. There really is nothing to criticize the way San Long treats me. Hopefully this business really has nothing to do with him, and once the truth comes out, I'll explain everything and apologize, Xie Lian thought. He'd only sat for a moment when he heard someone calling him from outside the door with a small voice. Your Highness! Your Highness! Recognizing the voice, Xie Lian immediately rose to open the door, and the person just outside leapt in. It was indeed Shi Qingxuan in her female form. She was still in the ghost lady getup, a light silk dress, her waist wrapped tight and dainty. The moment she leapt in, she rolled onto the ground in a heap and transformed back to a man, hand on his chest. I can't breathe. I can't breathe. Oh my god, I'm gonna be choked to death by this thing. Xie Lian closed the door behind him, and when he turned around, what he saw was a full-grown man in a wicked purple silk dress, lying on the ground, madly ripping at his chest and waist bindings. Xie Lian couldn't look and covered his eyes. Lord Windmaster? Lord Windmaster, could you not just change back to your cultivation robes? Am I dumb? Shi Qingxuan replied. Walking around in the dark in a conspicuous white robe, I'd be a target. But in your current getup, on some level, you're more of a target, Xie Lian thought. Oh, well, welcome, Red. Thanks for joining us. Xie Lian crouched there next to him. Lord Windmaster, how did you sneak in? Didn't we agree to meet 3 days hence? Well, what was I to do? Shi Qingxuan replied. I asked around on the streets, and they all said your highness was sent to Paradise Manor. And isn't Paradise Manor the Ghost King's lair? Even the name of the place sounded bad. I watched from afar and decided it was definitely an obscene and wanton place, so I was worried about you and snuck in using all my power. What an unlucky journey this has been. Either I get dragged to facials by women and girls, or I had to swallow my honor and dress like this. I have never, ever made sacrifices this huge. Aren't you rather enjoying yourself? Xie Lian thought. Where's His Highness Tai Hua? If you left him waiting outside, what if he starts something? Shi Qingxuan finally ripped out all the bindings, took a deep breath, and sprawled to the ground like a puddle. Don't worry, I pulled rank and commanded him not to move a muscle, so there shouldn't be any issues. But seriously, Your Highness, you're so lucky. Huh? Xie Lian gaped. Me? Lucky? Yeah! Shi Qingxuan exclaimed. Look how miserable Lang Chongchu and I are. We either get hung with the threat of having our pants pulled down, or we wander the streets like stray dogs without a place to take us in. And here you are, eating well, sleeping well, and there's a ghost king to keep you company. By that comparison, they really were indeed miserable. Shi Qingxuan finally pulled himself up off the floor. The most relatable character in this book is Shi Qingxuan. I love how dramatic and over the top they are. Just amazing. And I think it's really funny because most of the other books, the wingman character isn't always like super supportive and around, but I feel like Qingxuan really is like got the sign behind Xie Lian going, you guys go, you can do it, I support you. You know, John Chang was not like that. John Chang was not like that at all. Let's see here. Lord Windmaster, please... Oh, no, I skipped a paragraph. There we go. So, Your Highness, do you still remember our objective for coming to Ghost City? Xie Lian returned to being serious and replied, Of course I remember. Back at Paradise Hall, I was preparing for our mission. Shi Qingxuan looked at him in confusion. Really? What exactly did you prepare at the Paradise Hall? I only remember you playing around with Crimson Rain Sought Flower, rolling dice. You guys weren't even playing properly. You were feeling up his hands, and he was feeling up yours. What new kind of play is that? Xie Lian explained himself. Lord Windmaster, please don't make it sound so questionable. We were only trying something out. I found some clues here in the Paradise Manor and was investigating. To keep going, I needed a little luck. Xie Lian raised his right hand, fingers closed tight as if grabbing hold of something, and knitted his brows. I've got it. That is very true in Callie May. At least in her first work, I feel like Airplane, what's the guy's name? His actual name. Chenghua. You know, he tries at least. He's not good at it, but he tries. Zhang Cheng does not even try. Xie Lian's definitely the most lucky in that regard. Xie Lian raised his right hand. Oh, he's got it. Okay. The two silently snuck out the door, and after 2 incensed time, they successfully found the small building once more. Xie Lian approached the woman statue and took out the 2 dice given to him from before. He paused and took a deep breath before tossing the dice. The 2 little objects rattled before settling, and sure enough, there were 2 sixes. Xie Lian let out a breath of relief, but felt worse remembering that this luck was lent to him earlier at the Paradise Hall by Hua Cheng. Seeing his remorseful expression, Shi Qingxuan patted his shoulder. Well, since we've come this far, let it go. If I were you, I would have declined the mission from Junwu no matter how he begged, lest I be a poor friend. Xie Lian shook his head. In the end, Shi Qingxuan could only say such words because he didn't know Junwu very well. The whole business was certainly awkward for Xie Lian, and Junwu knew it. From his understanding of Junwu's character, under the circumstances, he would never have mentioned this, and would have appointed another official to the mission. But even knowing this would be awkward for Xie Lian, Junwu had still requested his assistance, which meant only one thing. Junwu had no one else who was better suited to take on the mission, and asked him out of necessity. If that was the case, Xie Lian had no choice. Besides, the missing heavenly official set off the distress signal 7 days ago, and Hua Cheng also left 7 days ago. It was a coincidence he couldn't ignore. Xie Lian sighed before taking back the die and pushing the door. Behind the glamorous gates was no longer the small, simple chamber he'd seen before, but a dark tunnel with a long stairway stretching into the abyss below, and a cold breeze blowing at them from the blackness. Xie Lian traded looks with Shi Qingxuan and nodded. One behind the other, the two entered the tunnel and entered the darkness. Shi Qingxuan took the lead. He snapped his fingers and ignited a palm torch and lit up the steps under their feet. Xie Lian closed the door gently and followed behind. Got some questions in the chat. We are doing a game later. It'll be a little later than normal because I'm setting up the new PC that Cygnus sent me. Thank you so much. It's amazing. I'm going to talk more about it in an official video later this week. And we are going to do something for Thanksgiving. I don't know exactly what yet. I was thinking it'd be fun on Black Friday to play Night of the Consumers, which is a horror game. And do I have an OnlyFans? I do not. I have a Patreon and a YouTube membership program, both of which gets you access to extra content. You can download my readings as MP3s. You can download my videos. You can get all kinds of stuff. Links in the description. Alright, where were we? As they descended, Xie Lian inquired with Shi Qingxuan. Lord Windmaster, were there any heavenly officials banished from the heavenly court in recent years? Besides me. There were, Shi Qingxuan replied. Why do you ask? Because I saw on the wrist of that waning moon officer from the Ghost City a cursed shackle. It could only come from the heavens, no? Shi Qingxuan was surprised. A cursed shackle? That Crimson Rain sought flowers using a former heavenly official as his subordinate? What arrogance! It can't be arrogance, Xie Lian responded. If one no longer belongs to the heavens, then wherever one goes would be their choice. Originally, there really was no need to question his motives, but the officer's been acting suspiciously. It's worrisome, so I wanted to see what Lord Windmaster's thoughts are on his identity. Shi Qingxuan gave it some thought and said, There was indeed a martial god of the West who was banished a few years back, and it caused quite the stir at the time. Martial god of the West. Wasn't that Qian Yi Zhen? Shi Qingxuan continued. But I don't think that Highness would descend to the ghost realm to be a ghost officer. He came from an established traditional background, and his character wasn't frivolous. If that was the case, why was he banished? Xie Lian was about to continue his inquiry when the two came to a flat ground after about 60 or so stone steps. Before them was a road about 5 to 6 people wide, going in only one direction that was surrounded in darkness, the staircase right behind. On either side were thick solid walls, so there wasn't any need to debate where to go. Just go forward. Only after walking along the path for over 200 steps, a cold stone wall appeared before the two, blocking their path. Dun dun dun! That's where we're going to stop for today. Thank you so much for listening. Schedule will be better this week. I'm finishing setting up the new system, new capture card, new streaming setup. Next time we're going to have an official office layout. It's going to be very neat. I'm excited to show y'all. Today I will stream a game, but it'll be later in the evening. I don't know when. I'll post on Discord. If you like what I do and you want to support it, check out the links in the description. You can become a member for as little as 99 cents a month and get access to new content, bonus stuff, all kinds of things. You can join the Discord to keep up to date with what we're doing. Movie nights, we're going to be watching some film adaptations and movie adaptations, like the anime for this book, Donghua for this book. I think that's everything right now. I don't know what we're going to be doing for Thanksgiving, but I'll let y'all know probably tomorrow. I'll figure it out. Thanks again to all of our members, like Jeff and Callie Mae. Who else was here today? Thank you guys. Phil, thank you guys for the support, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.
Goodbye.